So I do want to give a full introduction to our keynote speaker, Jordan Moreau, and wanted to share a little bit about his background before he gets started. So let me stop sharing so that I can actually, yay, awesome. All right. So Jordan Moreau is known as the godfather of data literacy, having helped pioneer the field by building one of the world's first data literacy programs and driving thought leadership. Jordan is vice president and head of data analytics at Brainstorm Inc. and a global trailblazer in the world of data literacy. He served as the chair of the advisory board for the Data Literacy Project, has spoken at numerous conferences around the world, which that is where we met Jordan. So thank you. And is an active voice in the data and analytics community. He has also helped companies and organizations around the world, including the United Nations, build and understand data literacy. When not found within his work of data, Jordan is married with 5 kids. Jordan is also an avid trail runner and loves fitness, entering and racing in multiple ultra marathons. Oh my goodness. And having fun adventures in the mountains. Jordan loves to read, often reading or using Audible to go through multiple books at a time. Jordan is also an author of 2 books, Be Data Literate and Be Data Driven. So thank you and welcome, Jordan.
Awesome. So I'm just going to go in because I know I only have 30 minutes. And the reality is, let me share my screen real quick. The reality is for me, I could talk about this all day. So with that, I promise I won't do that to you. But let me share my screen and kick this off. So thank you so much to the group for letting me join you today. And it's funny how different engagements kick in for me. I get requests to speak and they're happening all over the world. And it just so happened that back in, I think it was July, I was speaking at an NSF conference with another friend of mine, colleague and friend, and was invited to do this. And I'm super happy to do so. Let me skip past this. I was just given an introduction. I don't like talking about myself. I will also say I did not give myself the nickname, the Godfather of Data Literacy. Someone was like, you got to love it when they give themselves that nickname. No, I definitely didn't. I'm not sure how I feel about that nickname. Someone told me once, you know what people call you, right? And I said, no. And I was told the Godfather of Data Literacy. And that really stems from helping invent, pioneer, being one of the first voices, I would say, in the world, if not the first. Probably not, well, let's say one of the first, along with Valerie Logan from Gartner. The term had been used maybe once before we started to really maybe drive it forward. And it was probably a term that was floating around. And so anyway, let me start off with this comic, and then we'll jump into kind of the agenda. And when I have 30 minutes here, and I want to stick strict to that because I know we have others who are going to speak after me before the Q&A, let me start with this comic here. You have Dilbert, who is sitting here talking, and he says, I don't have anything useful to say, so I made a pie chart. And he shares the pie chart to his audience, and the audience says, ooh, it must be true because it's pie. And Dilbert says that worked too well, and people are like, I pledge my life and my fortune to the pie. Now, of course, Dilbert is funny, it's a comic, but there's reality to this, and that's unfortunate, where we can get caught up in the beauty of a data visualization and how great it looks. But the reality is it's not the data visualization itself that we should be focused on. It's what can we get out of that visualization that will help drive us to a decision that we can execute on. And we'll talk about that here in a minute. So what I want to talk about, it's going to kind of go on a 3-pronged approach: a why, a what, a how. We're going to start with the world of data. We're going to go into what data literacy is, and then we're going to go into how to be more data driven. And through this, key takeaways that I hope I impart as we go through this is, number 1, truly how to develop a data and analytical mindset. Now, this just doesn't mean a mindset that wants to use data, although that is a key piece of it, but truly understanding how data and analytics work, right? If we're leveraging analytics and data to make decisions, what kind of mindset do we have to make sure we're doing that properly? So that's one key takeaway. Another is a key takeaway of being more curious, right? Curiosity is one of my favorite things within data and analytics, and it drives a lot of growth. So let's start off by talking about this world of data that I want to kick into. And I'm going to start off by asking, and if we were in a room, I might have you call out. I love interacting with an audience if I'm in person. And I might say to you, How many of you know how many zeros exist within a zettabyte worth of data? And sometimes I'll get people who get it right. Well, the answer is this number right in front of you. That's 21 zeros. And this is one prediction. I've seen two predictions, one that says 175 and another says 180 plus zettabytes worth of data for the annual data sphere by 2025. That's fun. It's exciting. Isn't that cool? We have all this data that sits there. But the reality is, who cares? Right? Data, just because we can store a lot of data doesn't mean that we are leveraging it correctly to make smarter decisions. On top of that, just by moving data to the cloud where we can store at ease, that's not a data strategy. That's a piece of the puzzle that drives a data strategy. What we want to think about when we look at this is I want all of you to think about in your organization, in your career, in what you are doing, what objectives are you trying to achieve? Okay, that's a starting point. What objectives are you trying to achieve? And when you know what objectives you are trying to achieve, it then becomes, what data do I need to achieve these objectives? So we have 175 zettabytes worth of data. Wonderful. Who cares? The objective I'm trying to achieve necessitates I need data to support this. And we have to come at it from an objective perspective, not subjective, where I'm looking for data that will support my preconceived notion. That is a big key when it comes to data and analytics. One question you might be asking yourself, or others that you work with, or people in your life, is who has a seat at the data and analytics table? Now, I'm not going to read every question that you see here, but who has a seat at the data and analytics table? And quite literally, it's everyone. Doesn't matter if you're a data and analytics professional by trade, a non-data and analytics professional trying to get into the trade, or just someone who's in their jobs and maybe you hate data or hate the thought of it. The reality is we need everybody at the table because we're living in a very digital and data-driven world at this point. And we want to make sure that we are upskilling, reskilling, and doing the things necessary that we compete with these technologies in an effective and efficacious manner. We don't want to be caught on the outside looking in where we're going to have issues with it. And that's the essence in some way of data literacy, or one of the essences, if that's even a word. It's not that we want to turn you into a data scientist. It's, can we empower you with skills that make your job easier? Now, if I was in the room with you, I might say, by a show of hands, how many of you want to learn how to do your job more effectively or better or find easier ways to do things? And I would bet, if not all of us want to do that, right? Data and analytics is a tool that can help empower that thought process. But let's talk a little bit about this objective thing that we want to achieve, right? It's not data that matters. It is. But one thing I want to make very clear, data is just data. When we store it, it legitimately just sits there. We've got to do something to it to bring it to life. And that's that first green rectangle that you see on your screen. That's analytics. The point of analytics, or one of, if not the main point, is to drive data and find patterns and insight within the data. So when we know the objective we're trying to achieve, we gather data that might help us find answers. We utilize analytics to find insight. Then using a framework, we can take insight and make a decision. But that's not the end of the train, right? This is just the train image that you see in front of you. The decision is one thing. We then have to, one, communicate the decision. Data storytelling would be a part of that, or that would be one part of data storytelling. We then have to be able to execute on that decision, and then the train can start over, right? Think about like a Christmas train around a Christmas tree. We're coming up on the holiday seasons, whatever train you want to think of, these toy trains that go in a circle, right? You see them in movies, you see them wherever. Think of the analytics, data and analytics train as a circle. We start here, we have the data, we go around, we found some insight, we make a decision, we're getting back to the beginning. Oh no, we didn't get all the way there. It wasn't the right answer, or it wasn't a complete answer. We take more data and we iterate through it as an ongoing process. But let's talk about these levels of analytics. How many of you knew there were actually 4 levels of analytics? I think far too often we hear that term analytics. Maybe we think statistics, okay, maybe a part of it. But in reality, there are 4 levels. And let me use a quick analogy to hit home on this. And as we're leveraging data and analytics to make smarter decisions, think about these 4 levels and where you would come into play. But the analogy, I hope, opens our minds to it a little bit more. I want all of you to imagine that you're sick. Now, that might not be fun to imagine. And right now, with all the things going around, just a few weeks ago, I had strep throat and the flu at the same time. Last week, my son had strep throat and COVID at the same time. I've got 5 kids. So illnesses in our house are passed around like a basketball in a game, right? But let's look at this example. I want you to imagine that you're sick and you go to a doctor. The doctor looks at you and says, you're sick, leaves the room, and never returns. How many of you want to go back to that doctor? I sure hope none of you. And if you thought to yourself, yeah, it's a good doctor, please reach out to me so we can talk through why it's not, right? The doctor described or gave you a descriptive analytic, told you were sick, but that's just the beginning. Unfortunately, in business and organizations, that's where a lot of companies are stuck in the data and analytics spectrum. They tell us what's happening, what happened in the past, what is happening. Predictions could be a descriptive analytic, not the predictive analytic, but you're describing what could happen. And you sit here and say, that's it. That's not where we want to be. Now imagine the doctor. Let's go back to the analogy. The doctor looks at you and says, you're sick. Here is why. We've now gotten to a diagnosis. We got a diagnostic analytic. In business, it's a similar thing, right? Or in organizations, at schools, whatever the case may be. I'm teaching, supposed to be teaching at Miami-Dade College in Florida on Thursday. There's a little thing called a hurricane that might disrupt that. And I've got a nice winter storm coming through where I live. But when we take a look at this, right, in schools or wherever, you have a descriptive analytic. It could be enrollment in school. The diagnostic is, why is it going up or down? We're figuring out what is happening and why it is happening. Because when a doctor knows why it is happening, they can say, do A, B, and C so X, Y, and Z can occur. And sometimes the doctor will give you a prescription, right? This external thing, pills, medicine, that will drive your improvement. Think of prescriptive analytics, and you might have heard terms like this before: machine learning, artificial intelligence. Essentially, think about it as the data and technology telling us what we should be doing, right? That's the analytics spectrum right there. But most organizations do not use this fully. And I would say the majority of them are stuck in descriptive. And there's one key thing. You remember our train going in a circle? It's that purple box in the middle, iterative. We have to have the mindset. Let me ask you, do doctors always get it right? When we use data to make a decision, are we always right? We're in election day, right? How many times do we see predictions out there? They're not right. We have to have a mindset. Going back to the mindset, the data and analytic mindset is, this might not be fully the picture, but we can iterate on it and learn from it. Now, when we're looking at analytics, we need to understand the vast majority of people are in descriptive and diagnostic analytics. The more technical data and analytics professionals, we're talking engineers, data scientists, data engineers, data scientists, are going to be in predictive and prescriptive. But each of these puzzle pieces matters. We don't want just a pretty visualization telling us what happened to descriptive analytic. We want to be able to dig into it, grab that insight, and then make a decision and execute on it. One more slide before I define data literacy for us. So when we look at the world of data, right, the pandemic, I would say, reshaped things. Prior to the pandemic, I already worked remotely, and I had worked remotely since maybe 2014, probably 2015, and definitely from the mid 2016 when I started at Click on the data literacy journey there. So I worked remotely, but I traveled, and I traveled 1 to 4 times a month. And I think I made the joke, I don't know how many times, that as soon as shutdowns occurred, travel was done, my family's going to get sick of me because they're used to me being gone. I also thought my calendar was going to open up. The opposite occurred. It got busier. And I think the reason was the pandemic illuminated that companies were not data driven yet. And they were going to call that nerdy guy Jordan up, that global head of data literacy, maybe to figure out why. And I think one of the key issues that came into play, because if you think about a pandemic or an economy not operating as it should, one key thing that can help us drive to better results in a tough situation is data. And they were finding that data would have been fantastic at that time in the beginning of the pandemic, but I'm the data literacy guy. That skills gap, if you start to go to people and say, hey, we need to use data to make this decision and that decision, and they're not comfortable doing that, that skills gap is going to march right in the face of what we're doing. And that's a problem. And so the skills gap is what we're closing. That's what data literacy is. That's what this data and analytical mindset is shifting the way that we think about things. So let's define data literacy before I get into the how-to. We just kind of went through, maybe we could call it a why section, but more establishing this foundation around the world of data, the data train, and all that. Now let's talk about 4 characteristics of data literacy. This is the definition. Now this definition was the one that we sort of originally used it at Click. We changed communicate, or changed a word to communicate, 2 words. But the definition is the ability to read, work with, analyze, and communicate with data. Notice what term is not on here, and that's data scientist. Not that data scientists are powerful and wonderful and a great skill set to have, but not everybody needs to turn into a data scientist. In fact, if we went to people and said, hey, to compete in this future economy, you have to be a data scientist, which a true data scientist is advanced in their technical and data and analytical skill set. If we went to people and said that, we're going to probably turn people off to it, create fear, intimidation, versus if we were to go back, or let's use an example of an organization. If you picture an organization that has 10,000 employees, how many of those employees are data and analytics professionals? Maybe 500, and that might be on the upper end. As far as data scientists, I don't know, 100, but you have 9,500 plus that might just need to use data literacy to develop skills. The ability to read, which to me is the most important skill you see on here. Can I look at data and information, and can I understand what I'm looking at? The ability to work with it. Do we have the ability to either work in Excel? I think Excel can get a bad rap. For a lot of people, it's a great place to do data and analytical work. But when we want to tell stories, we want to do data visualizations, we do want better tools like a Tableau, a Click, a Power BI. For some, they might be building those visualizations. Maybe for a lot of people, they're just utilizing them to filter in the data, find insight, analyze data. We just went through the 4 levels of analytics. One key thing within the 4 levels of analytics, and I always question myself when I share this part from the standpoint of, do I consider this analyzing data? But I should probably just stick to it and say yes. For the majority of people, they're not going to have the advanced skills to do advanced analytics, to maybe really dig in on the diagnostic side. But what people can get really good at is reading the data and asking extremely good questions that are data driven, not ambiguous, not lack of specificity, but good questions. And then finally, if reading data is the most important characteristic on here, communicating with data, let's call it the secret sauce. Imagine you run this amazing analysis or you find this amazing insight and you're just very poor at communicating it. And so no one buys in, no one adopts it, no one grows with it, no one does anything with it. So when we take a look at all that we're doing, one of maybe the best things we could do is become really good communicators and being able to communicate messages. I have no doubt in my mind that my ability to communicate with you today and hopefully present this in an effective way is a reason that I am where I am in my career. I encourage everybody, one of the greatest talents and skills you can develop within data and analytics and outside is that effective communication. All right, so we've gone through the 4 characteristics. These are them. These are the 4 characteristics. One key thing though, let's go back to this data scientist term. And I apologize if any of you went to Harvard, because I'm about to disparage Harvard just briefly. They launched a quote in October 2012 that said the sexiest job of the 21st century is the data scientist. And I think that did a disservice to the data and analytics profession, because what that ended up doing, companies went after data scientists without necessarily knowing what to do with them. My current organization is a good example of putting the cart before the horse. And that is when I came on, I started in March of this year. The first meeting I had with the CEO and one of the other owners, the CEO, I believe is who it was, said to me, we don't know what we're doing. But when I get here, there was already a goal to utilize machine learning. The reality of that is we don't even have a good data schema and setup in the back end, but yet you want machine learning. We can't put the cart before the horse. We have to do these things correctly. We have to do things in process. Think of that train we talked about. Do we have a good setup on the back end? Do we have a good skill set to be able to do these things? So when that quote about data scientists, maybe I shouldn't be too upset because I think that opened the door for data literacy to become what it did. But number 2, instead of approaching things holistically, which is we want our data strategy to tie to our business strategy, Instead, we were hiring for a skill that we didn't necessarily know how to use, or we were buying tools and technologies thinking that was going to get us somewhere. All right, so let's now talk about the how. Let me give a brief background. So on data-driven, this term, I think this was the main impetus for me writing my second book, because early months in the pandemic, the term became bigger. And it became, all right, let's write a book on this, okay? And then I think last year, everybody during call it the doldrums of the pandemic, and then it's come back kind of fierce. So when we think of being data-driven, all that means is that we're utilizing data to help drive our business, our organization, our classrooms, whatever it may be, forward. That's what being data-driven is. You can be a data-driven individual. You can be a data-driven in your career, family person, whatever the case may be. So hopefully what you get from this as we go through and talking about leveraging analytics for decisions is how can we combine being data-driven? And make no mistake, being data-driven does not mean we're getting rid of the human element. We'll talk about that in a minute. But how can we utilize this in? Number one, data culture. The number one roadblock for data and analytics success is the culture or environment, personally, or of an organization, school, whatever the case may be. If the culture is not ready to take this on, we're going to run into roadblocks. Absolutely run into roadblocks. Number one, the thing we want to take a look at is data fluency. That is, can people communicate throughout the organization effectively with data? That's a big deal. If I came to this event and I started talking about Markov chain analysis, how many of you would know what a Markov chain analysis is? It's very rare that I have people that do. Guess what? A Markov chain analysis is a probability analysis in a way. And so if I came in and said, I ran some probability analyses, that's going to resonate more with people. And there's a flip side to both of this. Are data and analytics professionals able to communicate with non-data and analytics professionals and vice versa? We have to arrive at a common language. Iteration. This is the mindset. A great quote by Nelson Mandela, hero of mine. It goes something like this, if I'm messing up a word or two. I never lose. I win or I learn. That is a mindset that we have to have in data and analytics, right? Jeff Bezos has something that basically says, to an effect, and I'm probably messing this one up, if I can only get to, I need to be at 70% of the information I need to make this decision. Not 90%, not 100%. We have to get comfortable with the uncomfortable. Do we have enough data? You know what? Let's run with it and see. And then we find out maybe it was enough, maybe it wasn't, and we iterate. We'll talk about the DNA of data next. Data community. You're in an event. I would say this is a community of data. In your organization, is there a community of data? Within your life, every one of you can connect with me on LinkedIn and consistently ask me questions. I did a post, I think it was Sunday, about the hard economic times that we're looking at right now. And I said, look, reach out to me if you need help or something, whatever I said. I had 2 people reach out to me. Create your data community, people that you network with in your organization, in your school, wherever it may be, on LinkedIn as a resource for you. Learning fast. I don't like the term failing fast. I like learning fast. Failing fast, I think, became a nice company slogan, but not a lot of companies embrace it. I like learning fast. Iterate and go. And then finally, data skepticism. I want to create a world of data skeptics, not data cynics. The world is doing that with data cynicism. I don't trust the data. I don't trust that. No, you don't trust the use of the data. Instead of being cynical about it, what we want to do is ask questions of it. Could you have done this different? Is that different? How about this? That's data skepticism. So there's another takeaway for you. Become a data skeptic. Now, the DNA of data, this goes down to your personal life, your organization, wherever your career has taken you. We want to empower people to understand that data is another tool. Data and analytics are tools for people to succeed in their careers. They're not an end-all be-all. It's not the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. Data and analytics should guide us to the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. And we're not trying to change everybody into data scientists. So what we want to do is help people evolve their thinking about data and analytics to understand we want to weave the DNA of data throughout us. It's not that we're trying to get rid of our gut feel, our hunches, any of that. We want gut feel. We want hunches. We want to combine them with the data. And we want to empower people to utilize data to make better decisions, execute on things, iterate, learn, all of those things. Now, curiosity, I believe I mentioned earlier, I love curiosity. I have 5, these are my 3 C's of data literacy. So if I'm asked, where do I start? Right here, the 3 C's of data literacy. I have 5 children. How many questions do you think I get on a daily basis? Probably at times there's no doubt I am frustrated and I tell them to stop. But the mindset I hope I've ingrained in them, and I tell them I never want them to stop asking questions. As adults, I hate to say it, we are very poor at questioning things and asking questions. We get into our careers and everything and we just take things at face value or whatever it is and we go. Stop. Start asking more questions. Start asking questions that can be data and analytics can help answer. Number 2, creativity. We all have a seat at the data and analytics table. Utilize your creativity. Utilize it to become better, stronger, smarter, right? If you're good at telling stories, use it. If you have a weird idea, share it, right? We don't want to be caught in tunnel vision. We don't want echo chambers. We want creativity. We want things at the table. Number 3, critical thinking. This is something the world is in a famine on, I would say, and probably myself. I probably am not doing it enough, but we need to critically think. We need to think on the data. We need to ask questions. We need to dig deep. Now, I spoke about balancing the human element. We're almost wrapped up here so I can turn it over to the other speakers. But the human element matters so much. This could be creativity. It could be everything. We don't want to get rid of it. I think sometimes when, like sports, for example, you could see it in sports shows, he used the analytics. Well, guess what? If all we're using is data and analytics, we might miss the mark. And if all we're using is the human element, we might miss the mark. Let's combine them and say, you know what, the data shows this, but I remember the last 5 times that happened, this occurred. So the human element might override. And in some cases, you know, this has not gone right. Maybe the data can show us, but use your gut feel, use your hunches, teach people that, combine it with the data, and march forward to make smarter decisions. One key with this, though, is, and I would say it happens far too often that instead of having open-minded data, open mind to data, we look for data to support our preconceived notions. No, we have to have an open mind to the data teaching us that what we've thought for a long time might be wrong. And so we just have to develop that mindset around data and analytics that we could be wrong. So let's use data to answer it. Now, in my last minute to 2 minutes here, I'm going to pull all 5 of these up. This is, we had the train in the beginning. If we want to really be data driven, remember, I mentioned earlier that outcome is what matters, not the amount of data that we have. What are we trying to achieve? That should be your first step. Like if you were a business and you're trying to grow net new customers, that's the outcome. All right, let's utilize data to build that strategy. Then what tools and technology do I need to get me there? I think in the past, historically, unfortunately, tools and technology might have been put as step 1. Tools and technology are not a strategy. They are a tool to empower a strategy. It's not like we sit there and put the tools first before we build the house, right? No, we have supplies, we have blueprints, we have all that. Tools come later to achieve what we're trying to do. Number 4, do we have the right skills? Do you have data literacy skills? Do you have necessary technical skills? Again, not that you need to be advanced or data scientist, but do we have the right skills to get there? And then finally, do we have the right environment? Create an environment where people feel safe to fail at data, to learn from what they're doing, to have a project take 4 months and not go the way that we thought, and then we celebrate the success because maybe there's 8 key learnings that come from it. So with that, I'm not going to talk about this month. I don't like self-promotion. There are my 2 books. Get them anywhere you want. If you do get them, I would love a review. Beyond that, I'm going to turn it back over and stop sharing so that we can hear some other amazing speakers come through before Q&A.
Wow, well, thank you, Jordan. That was very, very, very informative and high energy. I took a ton of notes, so I really appreciate all of that. And please know that we are recording, so those of you that maybe missed some of those points can definitely, review all of that and learn even more. So thank you, really appreciate it. All right, so now what I'm going to do is just reiterate that the Q&A is open. So you're not able to see it. I am. And after our next speaker, we will be asking questions of both of our speakers. So please do feel free to use the Q&A located in the upper area, upper right of your Microsoft Teams environment. All right, so with that, I have the opportunity to introduce Mark Kralovic. is an accomplished controls engineer and software developer for Paper Converting Machine Company, so PCMC, located right here in Green Bay. With over 20 years of experience in software development and a passion for driving innovation, Mark currently leads the technical development of PCMC's machine data monitoring services, branded as Accelerate. Mark grew up in De Pere and joined the U.S. Navy after high school. And after completing his service, he was educated at the University of Wisconsin-Madison with a bachelor's in electrical and computer engineering. He joined PCMC upon graduation, and since that time has successfully led several new machine developments and software standardization efforts in the areas of machine control and visualization. Mark is also a certified functional safety engineer by TÜV Rheinland and is currently, and I'm sure that I did not get that right, and is currently working on a certificate in data analytics and visualization through NWTC. So welcome, Mark.
Yeah, thank you. I'll get my screen up here. Hopefully that's coming through. Yeah, as the introduction stated, my name is Mark Kralovic. I am an electrical and controls engineer for Paper Converting Machine Company here in Green Bay. Today I'm going to talk to you about leveraging data to solve problems, specifically in the context of machine data. So PCMC is a machine builder. We're an OEM. And for the last couple of years, we have been developing a solution by which we can both collect and analyze data live as it is coming from our installed machines in our customers' facilities. We use this data then to provide additional service value for our customers. So I'll start by just giving you a little bit of background so you can better understand the context of this application of data and talk about a little bit about our journey to get where we are today with it, give you some specific examples of how we're using some of that data to solve problems, and then just kind of wrap things up. Paper Converting Machine Company back in 2005 was purchased by Barry Waymiller out of St. Louis. Prior to that, since 1919, we were a family-owned business. Our corporate headquarters have always been in Green Bay. We are currently part of the Barry Waymiller Converting Solutions platform, which is made up of ourselves, W&D in Germany, Stax in Serbia, and Hudson Sharp here in Green Bay, and Northern Engraving here in Green Bay. We make machines that serve the tissue converting industry, the envelope and bag industries, and the printing and hygiene industries. So a little bit about our journey. That really began back in 2018. It was really at this time that the words such as Industry 4.0, IIoT, Industrial Internet of Things, started to become, like you might say, all the rage and buzz at any technology show, especially in the industrial automation space. It was then that we really started to ask ourselves, as a machine builder, are we ready for this, and what does it mean for us? So in 2019, we began to really put an effort to define that more, especially in a business case. One of the biggest challenges of that was to figure out within our organization, where does this fit, right? If we're going to collect this data from the machines, what are we going to do with it, and who's going to do something with it? So for us at Paper Converting, we felt that this was best to be part of our customer service business, specifically creating a new branch of it called Connected Services. We also started in 2019 to perform some technology proof of concepts with getting the technology on the machines to collect the data and transmit it. In 2020, we formally created Accelerate, which was a new department within our customer service division. We began to staff it and actually conduct more formal technology pilots on our machines. In 2021 was when we first took it to market as an official product, and we began to expand our monitoring offering across all of our product lines. In this past year, we have been really focused on expanding that offering across the entire BW platform around the whole world. So specifically in regards to like solving problems, for us, it was very important to kind of start with the voice of customer, trying to understand, what are the top challenges they're facing today, and specifically, which of those challenges could potentially be solved with the use of data coming from the machines. Some example of the challenges from our customers. One was staffing shortages, harder to find people, and because of that, they had less time to commit to troubleshooting problems on the machine. The other big challenge they're facing was a lot of machine operator turnover and training. Our large tissue converting equipment and flexographic printing presses, these are multi-million-dollar machines. They can be complicated. And so getting operators to efficiently run those can be a challenge. So to talk specifically about how we tried to tackle the problem of less resources to troubleshoot problems, how we felt we could help there was really taking the data and start to analyze the specific causes of downtime on the machines. We started to kind of categorize it. You might say the why behind each cause of downtime. Common things on a machine would be whether downstream was affecting it, whether they're waiting for materials, if it was in a process of being set up or a changeover, if there was a fault on the machine, or if it was actually just ready for production but it wasn't being run. Once we've categorized that, then you can actually start to further break that down by shift, by day, by week. Another area where we really took on was fault analytics. So on a large piece of equipment like a tissue converting line, there are hundreds of faults that could occur on that machine. So our first job was to try and start to filter out the noise, right? Again, try and place it in a bucket if it's a fault that would be expected, due to the normal process on the machine versus an actual anomaly on the machine. And then from there, further break that down to identify the true top offenders by total downtime, frequency, and for example, average time to recover the machine. And then to kind of, reinforce what Jordan was talking about, then we wanted to make sure we really presented that information in quick and easy visuals, right? If they're challenged for time, they don't have time to be sorting through rows and rows of data in a table format, right? We wanted quick and easy bar charts, gauges, so quick visual indications so they could understand a benchmark with how they're performing today and how that is trending over time. The second problem I'll talk about is machine operator training and turnover. The specific use case we're talking about here is on the machine, the customers are really struggling with the operators changing set points on the machine. The classic example is the machine was running great yesterday, it's not today, we don't know what's changed. So how we felt we could help with that with data was we began to track those set point changes on the machine. We started to track when it was changed, its previous and new value, and then we could do kind of a history analysis. So for that exact scenario where they didn't know what it was, what's changed from yesterday and today, now they can quickly go back and look exactly what those set points were yesterday, a week ago, a month ago. From there, we also began to break it down by OEE, right? So now for a given product recipe on the machine, they can go back in time and see when they ran that product the best and see what the set points on the machine were at that exact point in time and compare that to what those set points are right now currently running. So I guess in summary, right, as a machine builder, what we have learned is, connected machine data analytics does provide an OEM with new opportunities to help solve problems. Some of the key lessons learned from our journey is the business case is really, really important, right? If you're going to start to leverage data, again, reinforcing what Jordan was talking about, right? We have to start with the problem, right? Start with a problem that you can feel data can solve versus just starting to collect data and then just ask yourselves, what are we going to do with all this data? So that's what I have. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you so much. Really appreciate that, Mark. Wow. So I'm actually going to start with a question for you, Mark, and I will apologize on behalf of our other two panelists. Unfortunately, shortages in work and issues that come up at work, they got pulled away. So we do have Mark and Jordan available to answer questions. Unfortunately, our other two panelists got pulled away for work. So again, all part of it, right? Worker shortage, it is what it is. So
Yep.
Yeah, so I'm going to start with a question for you, Mark, that came in. And as you were trying to look at your data and clean up the data, how do you clean that up to really eliminate the noise that's around you, right? There's so much data available, especially from your machines. How do you clean it up and how do you go, yeah, just ignore that. That has nothing to do with it. Keep your focus really on this portion of the data.
I guess for us, especially the area where, in our specific use case where we had, a lot of data was, for example, the faults on the machine. A lot of the messages when we go from machine to machine can be kind of cryptic. And so if you're a customer at the end, and you're receiving machines from all these different companies, trying to understand those can be quite difficult. And so what the benefit we have as an OEM, right, is we have the programmers that made those faults, right? So you have to bring in our case, we went back to the subject matter experts in that case, right? Bring in the subject matter experts and basically work with them to kind of put each one of those things in a bucket, I like to say, right? Categorize it as, we basically had a numbering system, 1 through 5 of what type of fault that is. And then once we started to categorize those, then we could perform additional analysis of starting to filter that data out and clean it up. So that, I guess, I think would be just one example. But I think in general, the place to start with is you have to go back sometimes to the subject matter experts, right? Who is responsible for generating that data to begin with, and pull in them to help with that cleaning effort.
All right, Jordan. So to build off of that, so you have this extra noise, as Mark said, go back to the subject matter expert. However, in that process, you may have lost some of the team that was like, oh, that's skepticism, right? So how do you get them then back on board when you've now cleaned or cleansed your data?
There we go. I'm off mute now. I think there is a natural, this is why a good holistic data literacy program is necessary in organizations that you work in. And the reason for that is it's very easy and quick for an individual to be like, never mind, I'm out, because they're not comfortable. They have a fear. They just don't understand. So what I would say is, number one, make sure an organization has a good, strong, holistic data strategy in place. But then number two, it's having the right conversation. If you are a data and analytics professional, really hone in your ability to persuade. It's kind of funny that we're talking almost like a salesperson, right? Sales training, where the data and analytics professional, maybe it's a data and analytics project manager on these projects, has to go out of their way to persuade people, that art of communicating correctly. And so, number one, the natural uplift of individuals with data literacy skills should empower them to not leave the project, because there's a better understanding of how this works, that there is noise, that there is signal in the noise, that sometimes it doesn't go the way we want, and that is okay. But then number two, we think about if we are data and analytics professionals, I think a lot of times it's we need the non-data and analytics professionals communicating to us better so we know what to pull, but the inverse is true. We need the data and analytics professionals to communicate well, to keep people engaged, to keep them understanding what's happened, why it's occurred, how we're going to improve on it, and that it's all a part of this systematic approach that we're taking versus these one-off things that we think are going to work.
Very good. So marketing and communications, right?
Absolutely.
Thank you. All right, to both of you, and I'll have Jordan start, but how do you see the USA's progress in using data? Are we behind? Are we ahead?
I think it depends on how we want to define that, right? I think, unfortunately, data becomes very politicized, and that happens everywhere. So that is not just a USA thing. But there are certain things that are in place. It was back in either 2018 or 19, I was in DC meeting with a group that there is, I believe, a data strategy for the country, and those sort of things exist. I just don't think people understand or know that, right? So if we take a step back, moving away from social media, media in general and stuff, and take a step back, I think that people are better with data than we realize. Unfortunately, we get so caught up in our own beliefs, our own enthusiasm towards maybe a political party or something, this and that. That's what distracts us from the work. So I would say we are further along than maybe people realize, but the key term that I would add that we are not good at eliminating is distraction. Right? Distraction gets in the way of smart data and analytical work far too often. Think about the COVID pandemic, right? There was reality in it, but it became so politicized and polarized early on that distracted us from how do we make smarter decisions with what is going on. I was asked early on, given who I was, if I would write about it or speak about it. I said no. Too polarized, it's too political, or however I phrased it. Don't mind talking about it now. But the reality is I would say, one, we are better than we are, but we have a long way to go. Like for example, artificial intelligence, I think it was China that said they were going to achieve something by 2030 or something like that. And so the US comes along and says, we'll be there by 2025. We won't be there, I don't think, by 2025. But number two, we have to personally rid ourselves of our distractions, and those can be personal biases and things like that, to just open our minds up more to what data is showing us. And again, that doesn't mean that the human element is gone. It's not that our personal beliefs are gone, but it's, can we combine data with what we think and stuff like that? And are we open to being wrong? And that right there, data and analytics professionals in general, if you were to ask a lot of them how comfortable they are with being wrong, that's a downfall. They should be extremely comfortable. But that's just where we sit. This is why I think data literacy matters immensely across the world. And we're seeing it in so many different veins now. But I just think there's a lot of work to do.
All right, Mark, what are you thinking? Are we ahead? Are we behind? And we can actually turn yours a little bit more to the Industry 4.0 efforts. And maybe we're ahead of Europe. Maybe we caught up to them. Maybe we're still behind them. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I mean, definitely, I would say back in 2018, that time frame, the Industry 4.0 concept definitely started over in Europe, really being, they call it, the fourth manufacturing kind of, major step change, right? And so, the thing is, like, are we seeing it yet? And I don't think so. I mean, I would say here in the States, we're probably, equivalent now to where they were at in 2018, with more of, I think, the awareness. And it's not like the manufacturing space doesn't change course on the turn of a dime, right? It takes a while to turn that ship. And so I think there's a lot of that kind of that internal justification going on right now in the manufacturing to invest in this, to hire the right resources in it. So I mean, you're starting to see that movement, right? More data people being brought on, more IT infrastructure being put in place to collect data from the machine floor, and then looking at it from how they use it in their business systems. So I mean, I think we're starting to see, like I said, the ship change course, but it's not, to me, like in 20 where we have, like, in a sense, machines being run by AI and ML at this point, right? I think there's just a lot of time that's required to get that base infrastructure in place, especially like in our case, the OEM from the technology side. There's so many parts of it that have to be put in place, not just the technology, the security, data privacy, all these things come into play that all have that foundational work that has to get put down. And I think once that foundation's put in, then we'll see the acceleration of some of those more advanced analytic capabilities from the predictive type of and prescriptive part.
Okay, so I'm going to build off of that because you talked about, trying to have more of that OEM and some of the data all working together, the technology, the cybersecurity. So how, as an organization, do you get all of these folks, from the folks that are on the shop floor to the engineers to the IT to those that are running cybersecurity and those that have the policies in place because we have the cybersecurity insurance? Like, how do you get all of them to work together so that they're okay with sharing the data and trusting that data?
Yeah, I guess from our perspective is, one is that it's when we first started looking at this from the business case, it was like, who owns this? So for a typical machine builder, it's not standard, electrical or controls engineering. It's not all IT based. It's really this new hybrid, which is kind of what I become. It's a 20 plus years of doing electrical controls and automation, and now I'm enrolled at NWTC taking a data analytics and visualization course, right? It goes back to what Jordan was saying, is we have to learn new skills to become data literate with this. And so for us personally, there are areas that definitely move into the IT space. So we have engaged, like at the BW level, corporate IT resources. On the data side, now again, we've also leveraged some from on the BW side at the corporate level, some data analysts and data analytics people coming together to kind of, like I said, form this really a new, unique group of skills that are required for this in an organization. And I think that's why there's a lot of struggles with getting this moving out of like proof of concept in some organizations, because it's really difficult if you try and fit this in the traditional, especially the OEM space of an organization. It just doesn't fit in one of the typical buckets right now.
Thank you, Mark. And you're right. It's definitely out of the box thinking and trying to get folks to work together. So I appreciate that insight. Jordan, additionally, what are you thinking? What other tools, maybe what other ideas to try to bring folks together to build that data literacy community that you were talking about?
Well, I think there's one thing that I tell organizations to do, and it's what you did, and it was invite someone from the outside who can create excitement in the company. It's hard at times, I think, to get initiatives to run in an organization from someone internally. Not that a grassroots movement can't help and do that, but I think sometimes bringing in outside voices who work in it, that are subject matter experts, are powerful ways to get leadership on board. Another thing to get a program or a community excited is we could talk all day long, right? We're data nerds. We could talk about this all day long. We know its power, but we need to prove it to people. So I tell organizations, create a library of proof of concepts, 3 or 4 or 5 projects that where data is involved and there is a tangible outcome from that project. Because then you can be like, look, you might not have known where data came in. Let me show you where data came in to do this. And data helped drive this from this point to this point. Whereas without the data, we might not have achieved that. And that library of success stories that you can create can show people, there's something to this. And then maybe the final piece is teaching people how they can get involved without having to be that technical person. You're not necessarily going to be the one coding. You're not going to be the one building the data visualization, whatever the case may be. That's where we can get people excited to learn these skills, or at least take part in these skills, without having to be that technical person. A lot of people don't want to be that technical person. And so when they don't want to be that, and we're talking about technical things, we could turn them right off. Instead, if we talk about, let's just develop, this is data literacy in a nutshell, right? Or at least part of it. Let's give you a few skills to do better at your job. And it might just be asking questions. Guess what? I don't have to teach you to code. You don't have to learn to do this or this. What if I teach you just how to ask better questions that you can then network with the professional data professionals to find your answer? That's a way to get them involved and get them excited. So those would be 3 ways I would say you can get that movement going and drive it forward.
Thank you. All right, so Jordan, I'm going to come right back to you.
Yeah.
And that is, the question is really about what data tools and what technology are the best fit for an organization that definitely has a limited budget. So where do you start?
Yeah, that's a good question. So number one, and you heard me share it in my address, and that was, start off with what are the objectives you're looking to achieve, right? Because there are good data and analytic tools and technologies out there that you can get on a budget or to utilize on a budget. But we don't want to start with the tools and technology, because what if the budget ones are not the ones to get you to where you want to go? And so I would say start with that objective, but then from that objective, key things that are necessary, right? Number one is a good business intelligence tool and program in your organization. Microsoft Excel is probably the most basic you can get when it comes to BI tool, but like a Tableau, a Qlik, a Power BI, those sort of BI tools allow the democratization to get out through an organization pretty easily. And that's one of the keys, that if we're on a budget, the more voices that we can get to the table can be powerful. Remember, I'm not going to say we'll automatically get it there, because if all those voices are not comfortable in their data literacy, it could actually cause more problems than anything. So what I would say is making sure you have a good BI tool. And I'm not going to name a specific tool. There are so many out there, right? And there are new ones that are popping up, like a Metabase. That's one that's popped up. Different ones that exist out there that you can go to, learn how they're used, figure out if it's the right fit. The one thing that I would caution is when you get demos from these tools, these salespeople can make it purr like crazy and make it look so amazing. That can be a downfall, because they're going to be using manicured data sets, or they're going to be using things that make the tool shine, right? So when you are looking at tools and you have salespeople in front of you, have them use it on your data. That's the way to do a demo. Have them attached to your data and see how that tool operates. Because if it's on the manicured perfect data set that they were using to make it shine, and then you buy it and then you get it on your tools and you're like, oh my gosh, this doesn't do anything that I saw in the demo, we've just got to start from scratch possibly. So get good demos from these BI tools. You can Google the Magic Quadrant or whatever to find these different tools, and then have them demo it on your data or a sample data set so that we can see, does this flourish? And if it doesn't, you have a very quick out to say, it didn't work with my data. Sorry, stop calling me. So that's a nice, easy way to get that in there. And then once you get past that democratization of data with the BI tools and stuff, you're going to have good coding tools and stuff for your scientists and engineers. And those can be pretty simple, pretty straightforward. We use Snowflake in my organization. We actually use Snowflake to directly code in. And so there's different things that you can do throughout that.
Thank you. All right, Mark, what kind of tools are you using, and what has been your favorite tool?
I think I agree with Jordan that you know, it's typically there's no one shoe fits all kind of thing. A lot of it for us is, you know, especially when we're trying to determine like a proof of concept, we try and just see if you can use an easy tool like Excel, right? Can you learn something from Excel and then start with the basics? But that's just kind of an internal tool that we're most comfortable with right now is Power BI internally. So again, it's just trying to, if we're trying to get data and dashboards out to others internally, that's probably our go-to right now. There's some more advanced tools also, like Jordan mentioned, that we do more on the back end side of stuff that isn't like meant for distributing out or others to, it's just kind of coded in the back end. But I would say for us, our two are Excel and Power BI right now.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Microsoft tools, right? They've tried to make them easy.
Yep.
All right. Okay, so now as we think about trying to retain our employees, again, trying to appeal maybe to people to take up the data analytics. Mark, you are now taking the data analytics and visualization certificate. How do you get that out there? How do you spark that interest in individuals? And how do you get younger folks in and choosing this area of a career?
You want me to speak first?
I do, Mark.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I guess, that's a good question. I wake up and I still ask myself, what the heck am I doing with this stuff? I went off on such a tangent. But I guess at the end of the day, it all comes back like, since I've started at Paper Converting over 20, I've always just had a passion, like I said, for innovation and development, and for an OEM to survive, we have to innovate. And specifically for us, like when we look at, when I think about like the next 5-10 years on our machines, like when I started, the technology was changing so fast, like especially in motion control and things like that. It's like there was a big race to, we could, to make our machines faster, for example, like just make them faster, make more product, per minute, and that solves the, and so that was the big thing. But I think we've kind of just reached this point where right now we really can't make them run a lot faster, because something downstream will be slower, or they're just, so then it becomes, well, how are we going to innovate from here then, right? And I think the next big opportunity, right, is this data, right? Data on the machine. We start with this, right? Collecting data right now, starting to understand better how our machines are running, right? But then, that isn't the end, like Jordan talked about, right? It's iterative, right? So we start with data, we start to understand the data on the machine. Then we want to start, bringing that down to the machine and actually, get into actually, like some machine learning and AI on the machine, right? We start to, like I said, make the machines less complicated to run by, kind of injecting that artificial intelligence into the machine to make the machines easier to operate, to kind of close the loop down at the machine, leveraging these data, train models. And so I see that as kind of what'll be the driver, right? Especially in this kind of controls engineering space and machine builder space, right? Is it's going to, like it or not, we're going to have to embrace this. When I first started, there was a lot of change just in the communication platforms on the machine, right? Everything was going to Ethernet IP. So all of a sudden now controls engineers were kind of thrust into this world of becoming IT people, learning how to be an IT person on the machine floor, right, with your machine, and learning networking and basic things with that. And I see this as kind of that next challenge that people are just going to be kind of, to survive, to forced to move into this, right? And it is kind of exciting, right? When you start to learn, that the stuff about machine learning and AI, it's possible, right? But you have to start.
Very good. All right, and Jordan, a little bit different. So as Mark had talked all about the OEM and the folks on the floor, but what about finance and IT and HR, and again, trying to retain those employees that you currently have and get them excited about data, or even those younger people to choose the data analytics career path?
Well, I'm going to go with kind of a funny answer, but it's also a real answer. And that is tell them about the money. And I hate to say it that way, maybe, but that's the reality. Salaries in data and analytics professions are good salaries, and there are not enough people to fill them. Right. And so that would be one. Now let's go. That's a what, right? You're going to get a lot of money. I don't know if I'd call that a why, but also get to the why behind things, right? Why does data empower them? Because it simplifies your job, or it makes you make better decisions, which in turn could drive better bonuses if you come back to that, right? With and the future of technology. If you look at the future of technology, the future of where businesses are going and everything, to stay ahead of the curve, or at least be a part of that curve, data and analytics skills matter. And they matter greatly. Whether it's enhancing someone who's already in their career and they love marketing, can we enhance your skills with data and analytics? If you're someone just starting off or going through the ranks who wants to maybe go, and this is part of it, everyone has a seat. Maybe they're getting an art history degree. Great, get a minor in data and analytics. And if you're getting a degree in data and analytics, great, get a minor in communication or art history. All these things play together, but truly helping them understand why it matters. That right there is a pivotal point, right? Why does it matter if you're a young person? Why does it matter that you at least have some background and comfort in using this? Because when you hit the career path in 5 to 10 years, as Mark's talking about with AI and these machines doing things and all that, do you have an ability to interact with them? You might not be the one building the code and doing the coding, but can you interact with them to get the insight that they're spitting out and then make a decision with them? So it's more the why behind it, the power, why it matters, keeping up with the curve that is occurring out there. And then, of course, hey, I think people want good careers that pay well. Data and analytics is one of them. But to me, the why matters so much. You saw it in my presentation. I'm not sure I can really call that first section a why, but maybe that this is the world of data that we're living in. And I think that that's powerful to get people to understand, oh, this matters because of this.
Great. Okay, and I'm going to have you tag on to that, Jordan, knowing that you have 5 children, knowing that we have a few K-12 educators as well as college educators on the line. So you had said, why data matters, but okay, to a kindergartner, to a third grader, like, how are you going to get them excited about data?
To me, it's not starting with, one, make math fun. Because that's a part of it, right? I love mathematics. Gratefully, most, if not all, my kids are good at it. That's the one, like, if I'm at parent-teacher conference, they better be getting good grades in math. But thankfully, they usually are, whatever. But it's not about talking about data and analytics. When they're young, it's talking about their curiosity. Let them naturally experiment on things. Right? There's that Neil deGrasse Tyson, a lot of people know. I listened to him speak or at a podcast or whatever, and he was in Central Park for a concert or something. And a mother was walking a child. I think it was a mom walking a child. And there was a puddle in front of that kid. And that kid is going to want to jump in that puddle. But what do we as parents want to do? We don't want to deal with the mess. We pull them around. We eliminated a natural experiment for that kid to try. What happens when I jump in this puddle? It splashes. I learn what it does. If it's muddy, it might make a crater in it. That's natural curiosity. But if we as educators or parents or uncles, aunts, whatever the case may be, instead of allowing them to experiment in controlled ways. We don't want them getting hurt. We don't want them causing major issues. But if it's small experiments to figure out how this does, like my son likes to crack eggs when I'm making eggs. Great. Go crack the egg. Come help me crack these eggs. What happens if a shell gets in it? We have to take it out. We're developing within them a natural, hopefully, curiosity and a natural tendency to experiment and look for answers. That's how I would foster data and analytical skills in much younger kids, is getting them to want to naturally experiment on things. And you can actually do that in any subject. It doesn't have to be a math class or anything like that. Can we get them to naturally experiment on things? And then as they progress, we can start to bring in, hey, you already do these natural experiments. You're already doing things. Can we bring in some more? Now we can get, hey, look at the math that can be done. Look at statistics and how that can help you experiment. Look at databases and how that contains data that you can experiment on. Allow that evolution to take place. But when they're young, definitely don't talk about data and AI and machine learning. Just allow them to be kids. And as we are adults, if you're walking away from one thing from me today, start experimenting more. Start sitting there and saying, you know what, usually I don't do this. I'm going to do it and see what happens. Start to develop your personal experimentation on that and set that example for the younger generation.
Very cool. Anything that you want to tack on there, Mark?
I mean, I guess, when I think especially like the high school level specifically in that case, where, typically there's probably some form of, introduction to computer science, programming classes. I won't tell you the language that was being taught when I was in high school, but the things have advanced greatly in the world of coding. A lot of time, in the early days was spent just coding, line by line by line. But now a lot of the codes have extracted, layers above that. So you can actually get to doing, I would say, fun stuff a lot sooner. So, to me at the high school, there are, basically programming languages and things that allow you to do data science. So some form of basic introduction to, like what Jordan mentioned, some databases, being able to crawl through data, in programming, and actually see it produce, some visualizations, produce a result, to kind of abstract it from some of the deep theory of statistics and data science, which you can get to all that in college, but in high school, at least just start with trying to do some, fun stuff. See it do some work and produce some visualizations or connect some dots, I think is what I would recommend.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. All right. I have one last question for both of you. I'll have Mark answer it first, and then we'll have Jordan follow up and any parting comments. So, all right. Intuition, data. Okay. We know that there is a lot of data out there. We talked a little bit about cleaning up the noise. There are challenges, right? The last survey that I had seen, I think that was 2019, that our CEOs were provided a lot of data, but only like 75 to 80% of them were actually even looking at it. But the majority of them, less than 30%, were actually using it to make decisions. So how do we become those advocates for the data literacy and help change so that it's not all intuition and they're really actually looking at the data and relying on it and expect it, right? So Mark, what do you think?
I think it goes back to, I think a theme we've hit here a few times with, you have to start with a problem, right? You have to start with a problem that data can solve, right? Because, and sometimes it doesn't have to be a huge touchdown kind of thing, right? You're just kind of striving for moving the ball, getting the first downs, because sometimes it can just be something really small, right? That previously was a problem, but now data solve that problem, or some workflow automated through data, solve that problem. Because I think like why people struggle to get going is they try and figure this big, huge thing out. They think that it, especially from, from the OEM perspective, traditional engineering strives for, zero warranty, perfect, when the machine ships. And this is a completely different space, right? It's like you have to be prepared. You talked about to learn or fail, however we want to spin it, right? To fast, right? And it truly is. We've made attempts, and there were things that didn't come out how we thought, and you just have to suck it up and dump it and move on to something else, right? So I think the big thing is breaking it down to try and start with one thing that could be that kind of starter to get you going, one small problem, one small use case within your organization, and use it, versus trying to think you're just going to turn on this magic switch and the data is going to start coming and solving problems.
Awesome. Thank you, Mark. Always, right? So once you're given something, you want to do something even bigger. So it's a good reminder to start small and solve those problems. All right, Jordan, from your perspective, intuition versus the data.
Well, first I'm going to say, Mark, great answer. You can't boil the ocean. Don't try to. But so for me, I spoke about this human element in my keynote, right? And that is, I think number one, there's the mindset, right? We have to teach people that data is there to enhance us, not overrule us. Not at times it will, but not to be our ruler, right? Let's look at it that way. What we want to teach people is, number one, right, is we want to upskill them with data literacy. That alone, hopefully, should empower us to understand that our thoughts are wrong and that data can prove us wrong. And that's okay, right? Is we should be on a continual learning journey throughout our entire life, right? And that's just reality. Data should allow us to break down gaps, misinformation, biases, and stuff like that we have within ourselves. But number two, I think a key way to make people feel comfortable with data is to empower them to know you're not necessarily eliminating your thoughts. What we want to do is just enhance them. Sometimes the data might take us 180 degrees the other direction, and sometimes it might take us just a little because we were close with our thinking. And I think teaching people that we don't want to override your guesses, your ideas, your 20 plus years of experience, your 10 plus years of experience. We want to give you a tool of information that can enhance your thinking on topics to make smarter decisions. And that right there, I hopefully can lower any shields that people are putting up, any fear or intimidation, and just understand, hey, this is another tool for me. My gut might be right. But again, that does have to combine with the data literacy training and truly getting that culture and mindset of, you know what, maybe I'm wrong. And data and analytics, that's non-data and analytics professionals and data and analytics professionals alike. Because on the professional side, they might build analyses that are pure data and not be happy if people question it. No, we have to be happy people are questioning it. That's tough. And then people for such a long time who have not been using data, and we start to tell them you need to use data, that's tough. So can we train the right mindset, and can we empower people to know we want to combine this together? And doing that, hopefully, will make life much easier when people are dealing with intuition in these different areas that we want to utilize, but it shouldn't be the end goal.
Wow. Okay, so I have tons of notes. I don't know about everyone else, but I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so amazing. Really looking forward to putting all of this into some kind of format so that I can move forward with our own data that we have here at NWTC and leverage it more as well. So really want to say thank you, Jordan and Mark. Really appreciate your time and your expertise and answering all of our questions and sharing your background, and definitely appreciate all of it. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Yay.
Awesome.
Awesome. Thank you to all of the participants. Thanks for being part of this session of NWTC hosting our NSF Innovative Technology Series. We have 2 more that will be coming up on February 14th. We will be doing AR/VR That will be virtual as well, because that's what you do, right? Augmented reality, virtual reality, you do it all virtual. And then we will also have on April 11th, the additive manufacturing series. So our 3D printing, that will be a combination of both this virtual environment as well as in person. So we really look forward to seeing you at that event as well. We do have a survey for you to complete. I think it got posted in the Q&A. Okay, I'm not seeing it just yet. We will send an email. That is part of our NSF grant. As Jordan is well aware, with NSF, they want data, right? So we will be sending out that survey to find out how things went and learn what your thoughts were and how we can improve upon this series as well. Thank you. Don't forget today is a voting day, so don't forget to vote. And we appreciate all of the information. So thank you, Jordan. Thank you, Mark, and have a great day.
Thank you. Yep, I know.